Welcome to Citizen Action and EU-UK Friendship. Terry Reintke MEP visits Oxford. A public discussion hosted by Oxford for Europe, 30th of June 2022. Terry Reintke MEP.
Hello, I'm Colin Gordon. I'm one of the team in Oxford for Europe who are hosting me today, and it's a great pleasure. I'll just say Oxford for Europe is affiliated to a couple of national groups, Grassroots for Europe and European Movement UK. And we have a couple of colleagues here who are very senior people from the other European Movement affiliated group in this region, and that's Dr. David Blackman, who's actually the emeritus chair of the branch. So we've got a good representation of the family. We think of you as a bit of an old friend, Terry, because you took part with us in a Zoom conversation.
Yes.
Not so very long ago.
Yes.
And we follow you closely now in the UK and in Scotland and now here. And you can maybe tell us a little bit about your tour and how it's been, and what you've seen, what you've heard, your impressions as we go on. We know you've got to get up to London fairly quickly, so we'll stop probably at 1 o'clock.
Okay.
We've got a fairly ambitious agenda, but we're going to be a bit selective, I think, and we want to benefit from the people here who have got things to talk about and to tell and to ask you. I thought with this distinguished group, we could normally, as we say, set the world to rights in 90 minutes with no difficulty, but possibly this week it's more difficult to attend that, so we won't attend everything. Very rapidly, you, I think, explained to us that you were coming to see citizens, people in civil society and political society locally, active people and people involved in citizen activity, which gives us an interest in EU-UK friendship, kind of overlap between all those things. I think at the moment we've got a kind of big issue for many of us in the pro-European movement about the fact that we have problems with our democracy. And so I think the two questions which everyone would probably like to ask you is, just asking two, is how soon can we get back? and how bad does it look to you here at the moment? But we can go on into specific topics as we work our way through, but maybe you'd like to give us a few opening thoughts.
Sure. Thank you so much. And thank you for all of you that you came here. I'm so happy to be here, that we are meeting in person, because maybe I can start by saying, I've been following the Brexit process now for a while. We started the friendship group in the European Parliament, which was a cross-party group of people, MEPs that still wanted to stay in close contact with the UK. Now we have the delegation, but this is actually my first time back in the UK after Brexit for a longer time. So I'm very happy to be here. And maybe just a couple of words about myself. I'm an MEP elected in Germany, but I've always considered myself a European member of the European Parliament. So I'm not only interacting with citizens in Germany, but also everywhere in the EU and also beyond, obviously. And I'm working on actually democracy issues, rule of law issues, fundamental rights. I'm working on social issues as well, and I'm also the co-chair of the LGBTI intergroup in the European Parliament. So I have quite a broad portfolio of things that I'm working on. And obviously, as you can imagine, I'm a very big friend of the UK. I had a wonderful time in my Erasmus year in Edinburgh. So I was very heartbroken when Brexit happened, and I actually still am. And now being here, we also realized again how much we miss our UK colleagues, most of them.
Farage excluded.
Exactly. And yes, I think I came here, obviously, as Colin was saying, to get in touch with the citizens movement, because I can only say it again, I've said it in the European Parliament, that really this pro-European citizens movement that was developed in the UK over the past years, I think is really an inspiration to everyone in the European Union and beyond who fights for the European Union to becoming not only a strong peace project, but also defending human rights, defending rule of law and democracy. So I think that I wanted to get in touch with you directly, but also obviously we want to see now how we can strengthen the EU-UK relations. And I'm not going to lie, it's not so easy, because with this current government, I mean, you've probably followed a little bit the discussion around the Northern Ireland Protocol, which is very, very challenging, to maybe use a mild expression. And that's why we are very concerned about the situation, and we thought the best thing is to actually get in touch and to speak to stakeholders, to speak to different politicians, to representatives, to see what we can do to solve this problem, because we want to have a solution. Obviously, we want to have as close ties as possible with the UK, because I very strongly believe that at some point the UK is going to come back to the European Union. And obviously, I believe that, you know, if you haven't moved so far away from us, the way back in is much easier. So this is why I'm really trying to, you know, in different policy fields, we are now discussing about the Fit for 55 package, which you might have heard of under the name European Green Deal. So we are working a lot on addressing climate change, where I would really like, obviously, to also see what is happening in the UK and how this can be streamlined so that we don't move too far away. We are working a lot on issues related to rule of law, human rights, democracy, which I think, I mean, you said the challenges that you are facing in the UK. It's unfortunately not just something that is happening in the UK. You probably know that also inside of the European Union, with regards, for example, to countries like Hungary or Poland, we have a lot of challenges. So I think having like a pro-democratic, strong citizens movement that also goes beyond borders and still includes the UK specifically is very important. And then, I think with the situation in Ukraine that I quickly wanted to mention, it has shown us how very important it is specifically right now to work together for, you know, strong democracies, because this aggressive war against Ukraine, I think, has reminded us how precious democracy is, how precious peace is, and how important it is to keep working together. That's the background of what I'm doing right now here, and obviously I'm very interested in all the questions that you have. Also maybe what kind of support you would like to have from the European Parliament, because we are still a very, very big majority of members of the European Parliament who look very fondly towards the UK, and if there is anything that you specifically like us to do, please let us know. You still have a lot of friends in the European Union, and maybe to answer the question that you posed, which surprised me a little bit, because I think there are a lot of, you know, challenges and difficulties, but if the UK decided to want to come back to the European Union, I think it would be a very easy process, because I still believe that the very big majority of EU citizens and also politicians, governments in the European Union would really like to see the UK come back to the European Union. So I think that we can work towards this and build very strong relationships so that one day we are going to be reunited. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. David, I think you had a question particularly about the parliamentary process at the moment. How things go?
Yes, I'm trying to get this guy told you all the fact. Yes, there's been no coverage in Britain of the fact that the European Parliament Delegation for Relations with the British Parliament has had at least one meeting. Mm-hmm. Now this is, I mean, maybe in one or two of the Eurofire publications there's been a word. I didn't see anything in the national press at all. Can you, you're I think a member of the Parliament delegation. Mm-hmm. Could you give us an impression what happened in the preparation? Is there anybody enthusiastic that you could see on the British side, which is where we want to target? We know your side is enthusiastic and bit of fire. What impression did you get of the atmosphere of that meeting? And when are you going to meet again?
I think that actually Felix already knows that. Felix is my assistant who is joining me. I think it's in November.
It's the first week of November.
Okay. When we are going to come to London, because the first meeting is maybe to explain a little bit, the EU-UK delegation is a delegation between members of the House of Commons and the House of Lords, and from our side, from the European Parliament, that are working together on also a little bit the parliamentary oversight of the withdrawal agreement, but also the trade and cooperation agreement. As you know, one of the criticisms that we have always had, at least from the European Parliament side, is that it's a very executive, like a government to European Commission relationship that the EU and the UK have at the moment. So what we are trying to do is to get more parliamentarians in, because we think that parliamentarians can also really be very useful communicators and, bring up things that maybe are problematic in the implementation of the agreements, bring them up, and then we discuss them in the parliamentary delegation, and then we can bring them to the executive level. So we indeed had the first meeting. It took a little bit longer to set it up, and this is why in between we actually worked from the European Parliament side with this friendship group that was also a cross-party group. And in the first meeting, I think there was a positive atmosphere also coming from our UK colleagues. So we had, I don't know exactly the number, I think maybe 35, 40 MPs from the UK, and there was not always an easy conversation, but I think a mostly constructive conversation. And maybe also I'm expecting too little, but I was very happy about that. That there were people also from the Tories who actually wanted to discuss with us and see where, maybe common ground can be found. But obviously also some of the discussions were not always, mega to the point as I would have liked it to. I think it was overshadowed a little bit by the situation with the Northern Ireland Protocol. So most of the time we were discussing about Northern Ireland and what we can do to resolve this issue. But we also discussed about what kind of formats we can use in the future. Because as you say, if we are just meeting as parliamentarians in a parliament where citizens don't have direct access to, it's not as inclusive and participatory as I would like it to be. So we suggested now to form working groups on specific topics, like for example foreign and security policy. I would like to do something on the Erasmus program, how we can still work maybe for the UK to rejoin the Erasmus program at some point. That's still my very big hope. And then also to have MEPs come to the UK, but also MPs from the UK come to the European Union to exchange with citizens, to have some kind of different formats. But that's really still in the, we call it children's shoes, so it's really just starting to do that. If you have specific ideas of what you would like us to do, what would be useful here in Oxford, how we could give input, things like this, what kind of topics we should actually work on. I think it's a very open process and we are very happy about input.
Howard, you have a question, I think.
Yes. Terry, I'm sure you're aware the UK is itself a union. And most of the problems that we're experiencing since 2016 are actually down not to the UK but to England, and a specific problem that we have in England with anti-European feelings, stoked, I have to say, mainly by the English right-wing press. It's an entirely separate situation in Scotland and in Northern Ireland, and to some extent even in Wales. So my question to you is there any level of engagement between the European Parliament and the regional parliaments around the UK? Because I believe that you'll find a much more emphatic pro-European stance in those parliaments than you will in Westminster. And I think, incidentally, that those parliaments will be leading the charge, if you like, when it comes to rejoining the EU at some point in the future.
I would say you would also find that enthusiasm in a lot of bigger English cities, because, I mean, in the London, I was also invited to Liverpool and Manchester, which I believe also voted. I guess Oxford also voted.
Yeah, Oxford, Cambridge, London. Yeah.
No, but you're absolutely right, and it was also actually a criticism of the delegation, because so far it's only MPs from the UK level and MEPs who are joining that, and there was a discussion about how we could actually involve also parliamentarians from the devolved parliaments. And obviously speaking about Scotland, speaking about Wales, but also very specifically speaking about MLAs from Northern Ireland, because there is no representation of them whatsoever. And most of the time we actually speak about, in the first meeting, we mostly spoke about Northern Ireland without having people from the assembly who are, most affected by it being present there. So yeah, that's something that we are trying to do from the side of the European Parliament. As you can probably imagine, our British counterparts are not always as eager to do that as maybe we are. So what we have in the European Parliament is a group of Friends of Scotland and a group of Friends of Wales, which are then specifically working with a representation of the Welsh government and the Scottish government in Brussels. Because as you might know, both of these governments have also said that they would like to, for example, take part in the Erasmus program. So we also specifically want to work on that. I can tell you, I would love the whole of the UK to first come back to the Erasmus program, then come back to the European Union altogether. But I think on the way, if there are entry points where we can work more targeted with the Scottish or Welsh government, because maybe they're ready in some of the devolved areas to work more closely, I'm also super happy to do that. So indeed, we are trying to get them more involved, and I think it's a very important sort of way also to keep this conversation going.
So there was a specific question from one of our colleagues who's just recovering from COVID, in fact, couldn't be here today, but Cathy Wood, who's one of our leading social media experts. So we have a kind of Facebook advertising kind of enterprise here as part of our civil society tricks. And she was asking about the question of the youth, the youth visa. Young people, obviously, young people here and everywhere else are suffering from loss of opportunity. Associated with Erasmus, the threat to Erasmus in addition, and the problem about simply movement. And so it's a wish, which I think she's asking about, whether there's any way that this could be progressed to have a form of youth mobility visa for travelling, working opportunities, which would allow the coming younger generation to understand what they've lost and what Europe actually means in terms of future of their lives.
No, I think that's a very important point, because obviously we have the situation that people have lost opportunities because the UK is not anymore part of the Erasmus Plus program. And if I could maybe say, I think that the touring program, it's fantastic if member states individually also do youth mobility programs. I have nothing against that, but it does not replace the Erasmus Plus program, because the touring program is not, as the Erasmus Plus program, reciprocal, for example. So you don't have these partnerships that I've spoken to a lot of universities, also in the UK now, a lot of different educational institutions that really say that what was for them so useful about the Erasmus Plus program is that they had people come in, they send people, they had long-term partnerships on all levels, so the students, but also staff, on all levels you could really cooperate and have these long-term partnerships, and that this is something that the touring program now is not giving them. So they really still pushed for also being included again in the Erasmus Plus program. But you are also raising another point, and this is about giving more freedom, especially to young people. Actually, the suggestion that the European Union had for when the TCA was signed is to exclude all people who are traveling for educational purposes, but also artists. It's not only young people, you could also be an older person and travel to, a country to do a seminar, something like this, to exclude them from the visa regime so that they could freely travel still. The UK apparently did not want that. And I think for me, the whole argument, they said that they didn't want to join the Erasmus program anymore because it's too expensive. I think that that's a pretext, because I think what they actually want is to really disencourage people to have these kind of experiences. Because I believe in order for the UK to then at some point move closer to the European Union again, you really need people who have these experiences. Because also for me, you know, when I was here for 1 year, I was, I think, 23 something. Don't quote me on this. I had to think about it again how old I was. But for me, it was really a moment when I think I became truly European. Because I came here and, you know, I spoke really shitty. I still speak very shitty.
No, very good.
But you know, I met with all these people, and not only, you know, not only Scottish and English students, but in the University of Edinburgh there were students from all over Europe, from all over the world. And you know, I really became a person who understood that despite all the differences you can have, the different languages, the different backgrounds, the different views on certain things, there are so many things that we share, you know. And this was for me such an important experience that you can read in a book, but when you make it yourself, it has a completely different impact on you. And I really think that this is something, and I hope it's not true, but my impression is that this is something that the UK government wanted to disencourage, and this is why they dropped out of Erasmus+, and also they make it so difficult for us to have very, you know, easy, visa-free traveling opportunities for young people, but also people who are researching, scholars and so on. And I think that this is really something that it's, you know, it's horrible for the people in the UK, it's horrible for the people in the European Union, but at the end of the day, I also think that this kind of, you know, empowering people to make these kind of experiences is also about engaged citizens, you know, that you kind of like become a citizen in having these kind of experiences, and you are strong in a democracy in these kind of experiences. So I'm very worried about this. Sorry for speaking too long.
No, it's great. Absolutely. I mean, turning, I was just looking up the definition of your party and what the other party are besides the Green component. And I was very interested to know that it includes, your membership includes people who represent stateless people and minorities. And that's a fascinating aspect of the European Parliament and what your party does. I noticed you were having an animated chat before we started with Sean, who is, if people here don't know him, because we haven't necessarily met up very closely as organisations, but recently our colleague Geraldine, I know, has been volunteering. There was a number of people often have to help with that, the work that they do, which is considerable. And I know a little about aspects of Brexit involving, for example, the East Timorese community here, who have particular problems about their inherited rights from the Portuguese past, and that continues to affect individuals. And Sean might have a few things to say about that. I'm just going to wonder aloud whether, I mean, in the area of asylum rights, I mean, we have problems and Europe has problems.
Yes, absolutely.
I mean, from talking to Italian friends, I read things about Frontex, the kind of European external border police, if you would call it that, in that kind of candid way, and there are many issues about, and I was very impressed to learn, and indeed our friend Hazel Pennington, who is here, who's from West England, Burnite, one of the new citizen newspapers, which is part of our movement, important part of our movement. I think several people here have been working with them. But Hazel wrote a recent report about a visit to Riace in southern Italy by some of your Green colleagues who were investigating a case, very severe miscarriage of justice, which seems to be threatening there, which involves criminalising a very famous humanitarian initiative to welcome and to integrate asylum seekers into depopulated rural communities. So that's a very, very shocking case, which they were there to provide support to Milo Riccardo, who was the mayor who was being threatened with 13 years of jail. And Hazel's written a series of reports in Burnite which cover content which is not very often dealt with very thoroughly in our mainstream press. So we have shortcomings for sure in that department. Along with sort of saying at the moment, yesterday not only did we read about our friend Steve Bray being not arrested but undergoing intervention by 25 police officers in Westminster. But also yesterday we heard from a colleague that 5 women had been arrested outside the detention centre in the north of England, where a number of women were about to be compulsorily deported. So it's a kind of ongoing struggle at the moment. And Sian, do you have any thoughts about the EU-UK kind of dimension on that?
I mean, I think that at the moment, specifically East Timorese community, so obviously I work very closely with East Timorese community. They have the biggest population in the UK in Oxford, and they set up their parliament, their like parliamentary kind of stance when the war was happening in East Timor was set up in Oxford. So it's huge here. I think there's huge issue with really misinformation that's kind of going around. There's massive issues with them not understanding their rights. They've inherited these rights, but they don't understand them because there's no one really there to kind of help them. And so they're very disproportionately stopped at the border. They're being told that they don't have these rights anymore because they don't necessarily travel on their Portuguese passports. They just say East Timorese because for them they are Timorese, they are not Portuguese. But they enjoy those rights that they've inherited. So I think definitely there are issues around there. I mean, even speaking about statelessness, we've seen people who are stateless, who are, or potentially stateless, who are family members of Europeans, who are now in quite serious situations, especially ones who are, or especially European citizens who are living in Huntercombe as well, because we have a project with Huntercombe, and I work very closely with our coordinator there. We go to the prison and we help those Europeans there as well, and we're seeing maybe not so much issues in terms of where they are, but we're seeing like embassies are unwilling to help them once they're in Huntercombe because they can't lose their identity. And then you've got the UK government who are unwilling to accept that embassies went up, so you're reaching this kind of butting heads, so there's no willingness between these different organisations to necessarily work with each other as well. So I think there are emerging issues, especially just with the changing of the law. I mean, one of the biggest changes I think is that the EEA regulations provide a much greater idea of the word family, where the new regulations under the withdrawal agreement, they take family and they take your direct family, which excludes so many people, and that's something that's been very difficult for a lot of people to get their head around as well. So.
I mean, these issues have obviously been raised, and I know they've been raised with our MPs in Oxford, Annalise Dodson, the East of Labour, and
Annalise is from Oxford.
Yes.
She was a former colleague of mine also in the European Parliament. We worked together in Montenegro. She was the chair of the delegation to Montenegro and we travelled there together.
She sent her particular apologies for today. We did contact her office by postcard. In fact, she said she had to be in Westminster today because she was speaking in a debate about pride.
Okay. Yes, I totally agree with that.
In fact, Leila Moran, who I'm sure knows in Westminster too today, being the Foreign Affairs spokesperson for the Liberal Democrats, and who has been an MP here for the last 2 parliaments, and we take some small pride in the pro-Brexit campaign to help her to succeed in that election and to get a re-election. But she mentioned, she tweeted, I think, only a day or 2 ago, that there was a worry that an institution you may have heard of, possibly called Campsfield, which is a prison for asylum seekers, effectively, which existed outside Oxford under very, very harsh conditions, razor wire fences and all, suicides. There's a danger that may be reopened as part of the current new regime. So, I mean, it's just becoming another area of urgency, and again, we don't know whether the EU link to you and to your party and to your colleagues can help us, but I think international visibility, we like to think is still something that can make a difference sometimes.
And I mean also European institutions apparently, because you probably followed the case where the European Court of Human Rights stopped the flight to Rwanda from actually going, which is not a European Union institution. I know that you probably all know, but I think a lot of people still don't understand what the Council of Europe and the European Union is. So just to be clear, no, I absolutely think that we should talk about it. We are also, I mean, one of the suggestions also for working groups in the delegation, I think, should be around not only citizens' rights of EU citizens in the UK and UK citizens in the rest of the European Union, but also about migration and asylum specifically, because there are so many questions that will still come up between the UK and the EU about asylum and how, you know, asylum procedures are processed and so on. I just wanted to say one thing. I think the situation around this in the United Kingdom is that there are a lot of very bad things happening, but I must say that I think in the European Union we also have a hell of a lot of work to do, because the asylum regime that we have right now, it's not working, it's not in line with human rights standards, and we can see at the external borders of the European Union human rights abuses to an extent that, I mean, you've probably seen the images from Libya, you see what is happening in Greece, and there are pushbacks. We have so many cases right now. I mean, in Poland there is a very, I think, positive development with regards to refugees from Ukraine, but then if you look at the border to Belarus, there are still people, especially from the north of Iraq, a lot of Kurdish people who are there, and you know, in the winter people died there, freezing in the woods. So I think that it's an issue that especially the European Parliament has to try to put attention towards. I'm a little bit more optimistic in this than I maybe was a year ago, that we can actually move forward at some point, because I think now with the whole discussion around the war in Ukraine, and you probably heard about the activation of the Temporary Protection Directive, which makes it much easier for refugees from Ukraine to actually get a status inside of the European Union, and that there is a sort of positive dynamic starting again, so that we hope that through that we can also get the whole process around reforming the asylum system again. Because the Dublin regime, I mean, you probably know that inside of the European Union you can only apply for asylum in the first member state that you arrive in. So as you can probably imagine, most of the people arrive in one of the more peripheral EU member states, and then by default you are not supposed to go somewhere else than to apply for asylum. And this creates a very big misbalance between where the asylum applications are, and this creates a problem. We have the mechanism to relocate asylum seekers inside of the European Union, which is not working. It's not functioning because of countries like, for example, Poland and Hungary that are boycotting it. So we have a lot of work to do there. And I think that this is also why it's important that we still work together on human rights issues that also go beyond a little bit of what Brexit was, you know. I mean, it was also related to migration, but because I think that in order to really defend these human rights, not only, you know, for people who are already living in countries, but also, for example, for asylum seekers, it is very important to have these cross-border, strong citizens movements. And I hope that we can address it with our colleagues in the EU-UK delegation. But also, if there are specific things that you would like us to talk about, do let us know. And maybe you could, I mean, about the situation of the East Timorians, I actually didn't know, so maybe you could share some more information about this as well, if there is something that, you know, we can get in touch with our Portuguese colleagues or whatever you need.
Fantastic, fantastic. We hope he may be delayed slightly. He's coming in his lunch hour. A colleague, David, who is the treasurer of the Oxford University Ukrainian Society.
Oh, okay.
And I think these placards we've got on the wall there are part of a little initiative that we developed with their support and it was based on something invented by a colleague who's not here today called Maggie Black, who worked for the United Nations HCR agency. And one of their people was actually jailed in Iran, and they used the situation of having people taking pictures of their message on a placard and putting them online and circulating that worldwide. So we hope we did an experiment with that recently with some of us at a couple of the protest actions in Oxford about Ukraine, which were organised by this society. but I mean, they're quite an effective group, and they filled a big square twice in the centre of Oxford to mobilise solidarity on this issue. Not that exceptional because in the whole of Europe, of course, squares were filled across Europe at that time. But I mean, they are continuing to work here, both to look after the accommodation of refugees and obviously to raise funds, which they're sending back. But there's not surprisingly, there's quite a significant Ukrainian student community here who've been acting on this. And David may be able to, if he joins us, David can say a little bit more about that. But I mean, maybe Alex, you're a human rights and asylum rights academic at Brooks, and maybe you've got a few observations about that.
Well, nothing overly specific. I think Terry's already covered it, sort of quite a lot of what I've been interested in. But I wonder if in your sort of talks both with UK parliamentarians as well as in your wider work in the European Parliament, there's any reflection on the issues of refugees and migrants actually for the rule of law in regard to the fact that actually the UK's current approach to the Refugee Convention, for example, explicitly violates the Refugee Convention's idea that you can't discriminate based on illegal entry. And also in regard to the fact that the UK's regime for the Memorandum of Understanding with Rwanda doesn't yet have a concrete legal framework. And the Home Office's advice there is quite openly saying, basically, yes, there is a risk that some people might suffer persecution, and we'll work that out later, but we're going to send people now, which is obviously not compliant, at least with a wide interpretation of our human rights obligations. So I wonder if those links are being really explicitly drawn between the rule of law implications of the UK's approach to refugee law.
No, I think they are, because I think this whole problem of breaking international agreements, I mean, it very clearly now applies to what the UK government is planning to do with regards to the withdrawal agreement and the Northern Ireland Protocol. But as you rightly say, it also applies to other issues. I think there is a lot of concern right now. I mean, it's not a new debate, I know about it, that I think the UK government has been talking about withdrawing from the European Convention of Human Rights, which I think would be a very, very big setback, not only for the UK, but also for the Council of Europe and all the work that has been done on human rights, especially in the European Court for Human Rights. So I think, I mean, I don't know how closely you're following also related issues like, for example, the Istanbul Convention, which is a convention against gender-based violence, to fight violence against women, also from the Council of Europe, where there are very heavy attacks right now. Refugee rights that are very heavily under attack, especially when they are safeguarded in an international context and international agreements. And I think that we are having this debate, and it's also partly of why I think that the impact that Brexit is having, not only on the UK and the EU, but on an international rights-based order. Because all of these rights that, with time were safeguarded, where countries, signed and ratified international agreements, is being destabilized right now. And Brexit is just one example of it. And I'm very, very concerned that people think that, this is something that you can also safeguard in the national context, so we don't need these international agreements, because we can see that in the progression of the defense of human rights, international cooperation, not only in Europe but worldwide, also in the United Nations, has played an absolutely crucial role. And if we want to prevent regression of human rights, which we are seeing right now, you probably followed the Supreme Court ruling in the US, Roe versus Wade. There are, a lot of attacks on refugee rights. There are a lot of attacks on women's rights worldwide. Well, this regression is also partly done by destabilizing existing defense systems that are very often rooted in international organizations. So I think that Brexit is just one facet of it, but I'm very concerned that this will have much more deep impact and consequences, not only for the UK, but for Europe and for the world as a whole. And I'm very, very concerned, especially with regards to what is happening in Russia, with regards to what is happening in China. And obviously, I mean, we have US presidential elections coming up, and I don't know if there's going to be a Democrat sitting in the White House in 2 years. So I really think that we have to look at how we can, again, have a positive discourse about international law, international conventions, how we can strengthen them, and strengthen international institutions, obviously the European Union, but also others like, for example, the Council of Europe and the United Nations. Sorry, that was a long answer. Yeah, you know, when you speak in a language that is not your native language, sometimes you cannot be to the point as much as, you know, all of you can be as, I don't know if you want to speak.
No, really. Would anyone like to ask a question? Please.
I'm interested to know if there's anything any work that can be done within the EU to support British performers. So particularly musicians and artists. I mean, I have a lot of friends who have lost the option of being able to tour as musicians now because the number of visas they have to get, it's prohibitively expensive. The same for actors, touring actors. And then the other side is the fact that, for example, a friend of mine relies very heavily on selling his CDs across Europe, and he is now finding that his sales are 75% down. That's his pension, basically. Gone because he can't get that kind of market just from the UK. And it's because of the cost of exporting CDs. It doubles or triples the cost. And I know that the British government were offered a visa system, which they refused. So there was,
reciprocal arrangement for musicians.
Yes.
It's also their equipment.
Yes. I believe I don't have a very good answer to this, because the problem, that I said about the visa-free travel, we also wanted this for artists, so not only musicians, but all artists who are, having exhibitions or something somewhere else. It's something that I think we can put up again, also in the delegation, and try to put pressure that there will be an arrangement found, because I think the problem also was really mediatic here, and a lot of musicians were speaking out about it, so maybe there is a room. I think with regards to the CD sales, obviously if the UK was to rejoin the single market, that would make a lot of things much easier. But I know that's probably not the answer that will make you happy now. But we can see if we can address this, and maybe if there are some simplifications that can be done under the TCA. Because exactly these kind of things, that's what we want to do in the delegation. So we have the issues that, citizens are facing, and then, so if you could put me in touch with them, and then I can see if we can make a specific proposal what could be changed, because the TCA, as you know, the Trade and Cooperation Agreement between the EU and the UK, it is a sort of, that's the thing, when Boris Johnson said get Brexit done, it was, again, really a lie, because even under the Trade and Cooperation Agreement, which is already, it is a deal, it is something, but we will have to have debates about how certain things are going to work, and it will be a bumpy ride with a lot of different issues. And it's a sort of living agreement, so all of this discussion around Brexit is not going to go away, it's going to stay, because there are going to be so many issues that will have to be resolved on the way that we'll have to find solutions to. This is one of them. And, I think that the Parliamentary Partnership Assembly, as we call it, is one of the places where you can then address it. And then there also has to be a willingness from both sides to make the necessary adjustments so that for citizens these problems will be solved.
Thank you, Terry. That's good. That's all very positive and specific, and that gives some things that people can work on going forward. We've been joined by David. Do you want David? We've not met but face-to-face. David, nice to meet David Clark, who's the treasurer of the Ukrainian Society.
Yes, unfortunately I'm the only non-Ukrainian in the group, but I was the only one available.
David, are there any kind of asks or wishes or messages that you'd like to pass to Terry?
So actually the problem, to be very honest, there are quite a few, but we discussed this, and the proctor from the university said that we're not actually allowed because we can't become political, and us making these questions in a pro-Europe forum is seen as not okay, so it's one of these bureaucratic things.
You can send me an email.
I can send you an email, yes. But what I do want to do, just for people to be aware, and I'm part of the Ukrainian, the Oxford University Ukrainian Society. I'm actually the treasurer right now. We have been very active since February, We have organized more than 20 events, and with the help of Oxonians in general and people, we have managed to raise more than £45,000 to send to Ukraine. We have been able also to send, we even bought 2 cars, and we packed it with goods and we sent it to Ukraine. Yeah, so it's been a huge hard work, but we're very happy. And of course, I mean, I'm very happy to be in touch with you. Yeah.
Yeah, you can write me emails. If
Sure.
there are specific things you need.
Yeah. I'm sorry for that. It's just, you know.
No, don't worry. I know it's
Yeah.
not. Yeah, and I think it's great, and I think it also shows how much readiness there actually is for people to help in this situation.
Yeah.
And you're probably also closely following a very happy event for me that Ukraine and also Moldova and soon to be Georgia are new candidates to become members of the European Union. And you know what I felt that night when the candidate status was granted? You know, I was sitting on a square in Brussels and I was thinking, you know, at some point I will be sitting here and that will be the moment when the UK will get a candidate status. No, but we will work very hard to make it possible for Ukraine and Moldova to join as soon as possible. But I also want to say, because Zelensky was constantly talking about the fast-track procedure, I would say that if a country that had already applied the full acquis, like for example the UK, was to rejoin, that would be much easier than a country that hadn't previously been in. I mean, we're going to work very hard to make it fast, but I think that this dream that it would just take 1 or 2 years is probably a little bit too ambitious. So it will take some time for Ukraine to join, but we already have a very extensive association agreement, and I think building on that, we can really try to make the links as close as possible.
But also, I can comment on that.
Yeah.
I'm making this comment strictly from a personal view. This doesn't represent the society. Just to say, I think it wouldn't be good to accept Ukraine on a fast track as much as I wanted to be in, because if we start making this thing with like some members being able to go in like a fast track, like not complying with the main regulations that government do, for me it's the start of problems.
Yes.
And anyway, it's good for Ukraine also, because one has duties, one has rights and obligations, you know, wherever so you have to fulfill both.
Exactly. So I think at this point that there is not going to be a rebate, that we're just going to really put a lot of effort into making reforms possible as soon as it is going to be possible. I think that's absolutely what we are trying to do right now. And I mean, I'm also going to say openly, it's going to be challenging. I mean, it's a country that is currently under attack. You know, a lot of things are not working as easily as, you know, in a country that is at peace. So I think that that's absolutely true. At the same time, for me, politically, it was important that we say we grant the candidate status now, because we want to show that there is a clear European perspective for Ukraine, also for Moldova. Moldova, as you probably know, is a small country, and they have taken a lot of refugees. They're in a very difficult economic situation. And thus we met with the president. She's a very pro-European politician, and they have really done a lot. And I think just to say, it might take a while, and there are criteria that you'll have to fulfill. There is not going to be a rebate on that, but if we want you to become part of our European family, I think that was the right call to make. So I was very happy about granting the candidate status.
I mean, one of the kind of very humbling things about the current situation for Brits is not only the bizarre arrangement that non-arrangement that we have for receiving people and processing people, which is a kind of masterpiece of what Dickens, only Dickens could have satirized it properly. But also the numbers that we receive compared to Germany, but also to Poland, of course, staggering ability of the Polish society to receive people. And, we've got a strong Polish community here in Oxford, and they've been addressing their own issues in terms of Brexit. And Ava, you're with us from the Oxford European Association, and also close to the Polish community in Oxford.
Yeah, I'm from the Polish community in Oxford, yes. So, you know, as a speaking with EU, you know, as a Polish community, of course the problem basically with, for example, Erasmus and the student, it's just a Polish student just drastically down, you know, applying in the UK. And it's, you know, this would be, you know, what the word is like, that will be for the university minors, not for them, for some point, because they'll be find other university to study, but I think for the university, for the future, that will be like a disaster, and they're looking forward to make some negotiation, like not only on Erasmus, but at the same level. I think not only the Poland, but the Eastern Europe country, because the people can manage, have like enough money to pay a fee, the overseas, and of course will be some students here, but it will be very small percentage. So the number, for example, in the the London of schools, for example, from 140 students, Polish students, on the 1 year, they dropped probably 20 students. It's the same on the Oxford University. We got about 250 students every year. They drop maybe to 50 or even less. And like I say, this is an example. One of the countries where will be dropped. Because students, not only Oxford, but we're talking about all UK. And as well, it's like the problem with some families where, for example, the mom or one person living in Poland, one person living there, and the child grow up, and suddenly, like now, they decide to come to UK with, for example, dad working, making career. And they reached the deadline June last year, and it's like lots of problem because they don't know, and nobody has an answer, but they can still apply for settled status as a family member, or they have to go through the visas and this kind of stuff. So yeah, it's lots of like issue, and I heard some story about from prisoners where they send literally to Poland and they have nobody in Poland because they they can live here. And I'm thankful for Oxford because they say an agreement they've been not reported to home office, even the homeless people. And most homeless people, because I work with them, with the organization where they go settled status. But what's the point? We send them to Poland, and they haven't got any family members live there. All life, they grow up life was probably there. They got their friends or whatever, and they know how to live in here. And you send them to Poland, and they will be lost. So it's like lots of this kind of issue, and of course the Ukraine, as well as the Oxford Polish Association, will close. Helping, we sent already 4 big lorry to Poland with to help the Ukraine refugee in Poland, and some is the first aid, goods to Ukraine, but that's from Poland. They're going to Ukraine, and it's a nightmare, of course, with the home visa from Ukraine family coming to UK. It's still, progressing and making some changes, but I know from lots of Polish families where they want to host the Ukraine family, especially where the home office, I know this is not for you, but home office, for example, the application for the home visa, where it's like full family, 5 people, they took them each individual, so they send, for example, 1 visa for mom, and they haven't sent for another one 1 month or 2 months for children, which is ridiculous. If you send application as a full family, why not take it as a full family? But they treat each individual person as a separate. I don't get it, but I'm not, in a home office, I'm not. But this is like disaster where they don't know what to do it because 1 person on the family has the visa and their family here waiting for them, everything is ready, school arrangement, work arrangement, everything. But they couldn't come because, for example, 3 people have the visa, 2 people still waiting for a visa. So it's.
Thank you.
No, I think we cannot address this directly, but if we, for example, make a working group on migration and asylum issues, I think things like this could be brought up. And we cannot change what the Home Office is doing, but at least we can try to talk to our colleagues. I think some of them are also actually really active on this. And then we can try to address it and say what kind of facilitation can there be, because obviously the UK is not part of the relocation system anymore, but or wouldn't be. But then still to say, like, how can we help in this as well? And maybe just to add one thing on the Erasmus Plus thing that you mentioned, because I think maybe because in the UK there is a history of tuition fees, people don't know this, but for me, financially, to do an Erasmus, I mean, in Scotland it was then a little bit of a different issue, but I was also applying for some universities in England. And for me, financially, they give you a small scholarship for the Erasmus program, but that wasn't even the big thing. The big thing was that I wouldn't have to pay tuition fees under the Erasmus program. And that is the big difference, because now people are saying, yeah, but you can do individual partnerships between universities, but I wouldn't have been able to pay a tuition fee in an English university. And I think that this is what people don't realize, especially for then students. I mean, you also have obviously apprenticeships and people in different forms of education who are using the Erasmus program. But for students to be able to pay the tuition fee in England, it was really only possible with the Erasmus program that it was dropped, you know. So I think another very good reason why it would be so good for the UK to rejoin, because it really helps to have this exchange. And the people in the University of Edinburgh, they're also telling me that they feel also the other students are really missing out, because they're going to be less students from other European countries who are studying with them, which for a lot of students in universities is part of, you know, the experience and meeting people from all over Europe when they're studying. So it's not only for the people who can't come anymore, but it's also for the people not to have this rich environment of, you know, having people from all over Europe and beyond studying in universities. Yeah, so again, as you can probably see, I'm very passionate about having the UK in the Erasmus Plus program.
Yes, well, we're delighted that you are, and we're grateful for that. Many hands raised.
One quick question on the Erasmus. Are you aware of sort of citizens groups who are very, very pro-Erasmus and working? Because I've just sort of gone online, and the Rejoin EU party, are you speaking to groups like that, or do you need more information from us about different groups who are doing things?
If you have contact info, that's super useful, because we are trying to get this Erasmus, because I think it's such an obvious mistake, you know? I mean, you can discuss about Brexit, whatever, but, you know, the Erasmus Plus program is so valuable, and it's something that has been so successful, you know? And if you ask EU citizens what they like about the European Union, a lot of people say freedom of movement, which maybe is not the case so much in the UK for some people, but everybody says the Erasmus program is one of the big things that people really love about the European Union. So I would really like to, you know, try to get people talking about this again. If you have contacts, yes, do let us know. Thanks.
Terry, you mentioned the Irish protocol earlier. Allowing me to get this country from the government, there's this superb deal that Johnson negotiated. It worked perfectly in practice, but there were some teething issues, and the EU are being obstructive in improving this, what was described originally as a perfect arrangement. So I'm interested to hear what your take is on this.
Europe has broken the wrapping on the other ready deal.
Yeah, you know, and then he was saying in an interview, yeah, but I signed this deal, but I didn't think that the European Union would actually ask it to be implemented. I mean, seriously, sometimes I hear the Prime Minister give interviews and I'm like, how can this how can this person be the Prime Minister of one of the countries in the world that I love and respect the most? You know what I mean? This is like, no, I mean, to try to stay on point and not to get agitated.
Get agitated.
You don't want to see me get agitated. I can be quite agitated. No, I think when we talk about the Northern Ireland Protocol right now, I mean, the story of it, I don't have to go into detail. You all know, I mean, Felix, we were talking about it before, and Felix was actually saying, yeah, you know, if we had the deal that Theresa May negotiated, these problems, I mean, there would be problems, but these problems as they are now would be there. And Johnson said that, you know, the Theresa May deal is so bad and so on. I mean, in a way, I think that what the British government, or what the UK government is doing right now is using the problems of the Northern Ireland or the implementation issues a little bit as, they're bringing this topic up every time they need a distraction from issues that are going on domestically. And I have the feeling that they're really, in a way, instrumentalizing it. Because, as you probably know, I mean, with regards to the checks, for example, the European Commission, I think last October, help me out here, has proposed a package. I think there are proposals in there that would cut the need for checks for 80%, and they would really have very, very limited paperwork. So it would really make the whole thing much more practical. We always said there would be checks. It's not that now you can come back and say, but he said it in Parliament, there wouldn't be checks between Northern Ireland and the rest of the UK. Well, it's written in the treaty. So yes, there will have to be certain checks. Also, that could be simplified by, for example, signing an agreement on veterinary issues. Things could be really much more easier if the UK government was ready to agree on certain basic standards. And that is a little bit the problem that we are facing right now, that I have the feeling right now they don't really have an interest domestically to agree and to find a solution to these things, because they are kind of using it in internal politics and not so much trying to actually solve the issues on the ground, because the Commission has been on the ground, a lot of, people from the European side are on the ground to really see, what can we do. I just want to say one thing, and I'm going to say it very categorically. The integrity of the thing, peace in Northern Ireland and having good relations with the UK is very, very, very crucial for everyone in the European Union. But the integrity of the single market is something also that keeps the European Union together. So and rules, So there need to be a way that there can be checks to the most limited extent possible. I absolutely agree, but that there can still be a possibility to find out what is then potentially entering the single market, so that we can be sure that minimum standards that we have agreed on are not going to be undermined by that. I think that's actually not a big ask. It's something that has been clear from the very beginning. I think solutions can be found. There just has to be a political will on both sides to do it. I think the Commission has really shown that they are very ready to compromise in all the different fields. And now it's really up to the UK government to come back to the negotiation table and to sit down as reasonable people, rationally look at the problems and try to solve them together. But right now, if I'm being honest with you, I have very little optimism that this is what's going to happen. And that is a shame, mostly for the people in Northern Ireland, because I think for them there is a lot at stake, but also for the people in the UK and also for everybody in the European Union. Because, the consequences that this could have, especially in a situation that we are in right now, where a lot of people are already facing economic hardship, can be very, very, very dire. So I think really, if you can in any way put pressure on the UK government to say, try to find solutions for this is what we need right now.
Thank you. Louise Upton, you wanted to say something.
Yes. Hi, I'm Louise Upton, I'm an Oxford City Councillor. Thank you very much for coming, Terry. But my day job is I'm a scientist at one of our two market universities here. And for me, one of the great tragedies of Brexit is the effect on scientific collaboration. You spoke about the wonderful atmosphere for students, but it's the same in the research labs. If we go out for a Christmas meal, there may be 20 people there, 16 different nationalities, sometimes I'm the only British person there. And it's wonderful. And we've been part of some of the European grant fundings which links us to a lab in Paris and to one in Turin, and that is so important for scientific advancement, that cross-fertilisation. And another thing I was really struck by, it was the 75th anniversary of our twinning with Bonn last week, and we had lots of wonderful scientists over, and wonderful people over, and I had one staying with me. He was a Green Party member actually. And he's a mathematician. He was just finishing up his PhD, and he was saying, well, for him actually, Brexit has been very good for him, because the weather forecasting station, I don't remember the exact name of it, that used to be here, is moving to Bonn. And they'll be wanting statisticians, so fantastic, he can go and do that. So just, the loss of scientific collaboration is just tragic. Do you have any thoughts about how we can rebuild that, get that going again? We really enjoy.
Okay, I have to that Bonn was actually the partner city of Oxford. And actually, I have an aunt in Bonn. You know, I'm from the region, and my aunt moved to Bonn, and she's an English teacher. So she speaks like this, you know, she has this very fancy British accent, and she was one of the people who actually, like in our family, I think always pushed me and my sister and my cousins to be very interested in the UK. So, you know, I always get emotional when I think about this, and then, you know, and I'm sure that I'm going to push her to come to Oxford, and I think she would love to meet all of you, and, you know, that this kind of excitement and curiosity, also what you talked about in research, that, you know, people can make experiences in different parts of Europe, and that this is really something that I grew up with, also because of people like my aunt, who's from Bonn, and that this is something that is now at least not as easy as it used to be anymore. I mean, I would obviously say to try to campaign about the Erasmus Plus program. I mean, we still have Horizon, which the UK is still part of, so to really engage in that. And we are also now fighting for UK universities to be able to stay in the research clusters, where I think there was a little bit of discussion. I don't know the nitty-gritty of it, and I don't know where it stands right now. But we are trying to do that, because I think that's also something that in the delegation, the MPs and the MEPs really share, that we would like to keep these links in research. But I think maybe what will also be needed is more, you know, university to university sort of partnership arrangements, which I know is, you know, it's a lot of administration, it's very often more work, but I think at least to bridge this time when the UK will hopefully be back in the Erasmus Plus program, I think it will be important to do that also on a more individual basis, because I think that's exactly what we need to do right now. Instead of, you know, turning our backs to each other, we need to try to engage even more on all possible levels, be it city partnerships, be it research, be it musicians, be it, you know, the fire brigade or whoever, like just try to get people together, organize exchanges, meet each other, because I think then you will have a fertile ground for better things to come.
Yes. Just to say, just regarding the German making the bond link, the twinning idea, which is of course not new, it's a post-war idea at least, and if there are vast numbers of cities in Ukraine which have twinning relationships with the West and with Russian cities also, I can find. But in the case of Bonn, you might be interested to know that there was a visit by the Bonn choir came to Oxford, and there was an event outside the Sheldonian Theatre where the two choirs sang Hymns Joy together. Although I should say at that time the twinning organisation weren't too happy about that, because they wanted to steer clear of anything controversial. It's a bit like the problem that you mentioned, David, being the University Society. The twinning has been historically apolitical, so now that a relationship with Europe is apolitical, having one, so it's a political football in a sense, it becomes a more delicate thing to look at. But I think the twinning relationship city to city, I think, is something that we do believe in, and it's a resource we can try to use to fight the whole kind of tide of xenophobia that's coming down on us.
And how can this be a political issue? Like, even if you were pro-Brexit, wouldn't you still want to have close, you know, amicable ties with the rest of Europe? I don't know. To me, it's like it's hard to understand this, but sorry to interrupt.
There are people involved in our twinning link groups who are pro-Brexit, and yet they're twinning with.
Exactly. I mean, it's even put that there, you know.
I've been reminded we've got 9 minutes to go before we have to.
Okay. I'm going to be shorter. I'm sorry about that.
By the way, I noticed that the very interesting events you've got up there, the team includes the national groups, including the 3 million, who are, we know well, very efficient kind of campaign group on behalf of Ava's kind of fellow European citizens and the various properties they've still got. So I'm sure that would be great later. But several hands raised. Peter Harbour.
Hello. A long time ago, but I have worked with the European Space Agency, with the Euratom. I have taught students through Erasmus. My daughter is a fine product of the European school. All of these things have been taken away And quite frankly, it's extremely depressing to find that having happened when you know from the inside how valuable the links are that you have. And listening to some of the other things you've been talking about, they're linked. I don't know if you mentioned the Copernicus climate change earlier, did you?
No, I haven't. That is true.
Okay. Well, I wonder, given that this is a very powerful science area with, well, I don't need to enumerate all the different places there are because they're easy to find. I was wondering whether links between the twin towns MEPs of the whole area would be a good idea, and whether they could push that agenda.
I think that's a fantastic idea. I mean, I actually have a colleague from Bonn also, Alexandra Gese, who happens to work a lot on, I mean, it's not specifically what you were talking about, but she works a lot on digitalization, digital issues. You know, we have the Digital Services Act coming up, which is basically really going to, well, regulate the digital space in the European Union, and a lot of people think it's also going to be groundbreaking in terms of then setting an example for other countries and places in the world to follow. So I think that if you would like to work specifically on something like this, I can definitely ask her. I know that she's also very engaged in Bonn with the local group, so I'm sure that she would be happy to do that. And I don't know where else from this region there are maybe cities.
Well, I would include Abingdon so that we get the Abingdon twin town.
And then you can have other partner towns. I don't know, where does Oxford, you probably also have partner towns in France or Poland or...
Maybe we should write to you and tell you.
Yes, I mean, sorry, I don't know all the partner towns, but maybe that would be a very interesting idea, and then to organize something. You know, I was also thinking, I mean, this is now a little bit like, maybe also to get your feedback on it, maybe what we should try to push for is to have a sort of EU-UK Friendship Day. Because I have the feeling that, you know, when you have a specific date on which you can do things, that a lot of associations, groups, you know, whoever, they have like a day. We have a German-French Friendship Day, and then we could have something for the EU and the UK, so that if you would want to invite MEPs, so if you would want to have a group coming over from another EU country, something like this, so you could pick that day just to have a hook. You know, because sometimes what it takes is really a hook that, you know, okay, I have a reason and then I'm going to do something on this. And so it's something that I wanted to maybe ask in the delegation what people think about it and then see. But if you need contacts, get in touch with me and we can provide you with all the MEPs.
Okay, and can I also ask something? When I worked at JET, we successfully, with the help of the European Parliament, sued the Commission because of inequality between the British and the rest. The British people, not working there, the British elsewhere, didn't want that to happen. So we found that the Parliament had very powerful links with the Commission in a way that maybe there's something that you can do to make the Commission pay attention to some of the negotiations that are going on and feed in information of the kind that we're talking about through the networks we're talking about. Does that make a lot of sense?
Absolutely. If you have questions, if you don't get information, if you want us to raise an issue, if you need something to be discussed in plenary in the European Parliament, I mean, I cannot promise that it's going to happen, but I can always tell you there are a lot of MEPs in the European Parliament who also still feel that they're MEPs for the citizens in the UK.
Yeah.
So if you need something, there are still a lot of people who are going to help you get what you need, or, you know, provide information or expertise or things like this to push the Commission to do something. So please do get in touch. We are a very big, it's not only me, we are a very big group of very, very committed MEPs in this.
Well, for information, we went through 3 Advocate Generals saying we couldn't do this before we eventually got the case done. Persistence matters.
Yes, it does.
That's a very, very interesting and another very generous offer you made, but it's intrigued me in a way because I was interested to look at the registration form for tonight's event in London, which is hybrid, so that we can also go online to follow things you might have to say about that. It was on thing saying speak to your MEP, contact your MEP, and that they had this pro forma, which I think dated back from before Brexit, possibly arranged. so they could talk to Annalise Dodds as your MEP, and so contact your MEP. But the idea that our MEPs who are still our MEP, in a sense, is kind of a very moving thing, and a generous kind of fact that we appreciate. Although I think I'd also just feeding back on what you said to us at various points. I think you said to us that people have to help themselves, and we're in a bad situation here, and we have to do all we can ourselves to deal with the situation. But we have friends who are observing it and doing what they can, confirming it is as bad as we think it is. I think you're pulling your punches a bit, possibly for diplomatic reasons, but we know it is bad, and it's so bad that everyone outside can see it as well as we can, if not better. Alex, I think you had your hand raised. Would you like to ask the last question?
Yeah, so just to briefly pick up on something Louise had already mentioned, and that's about the kind of links between Horizon funding and links back to Erasmus, because actually I think it's something that you're right in the sense that there's broad agreement that everyone wants Horizon funding to stay, even UK government ministers talk positively about it. But there seems to be now that there will be some issues with that within the TCA issues. So I just wonder if there's anything that can be raised both in the delegation and in the European Parliament about sort of trying to manage that, because I think you're right that it sort of keeps the link for stuff like Erasmus, but I'm worried that that will end up getting severed precisely because the UK is trying to sort of unwind parts of the TCA elsewhere.
It's good that you're making that point. We also discussed it already in all the previous meetings. We also had a very big point on it in the delegation meeting. We're going to talk to the Commission again. I mean, what the Commission is saying right now is that there is this very, very difficult situation with the UK government, and they don't want to, jump to implementation of the programs while they don't know that they can actually trust the UK government to implement the full agreement. And I can get their reasoning. At the same time, I now have a little bit the impression that the people who are suffering from this the most are actually, researchers, people who are dependent also on some clarity from the Horizon program. So we are going to try to get in touch with the Commission about this again. I already have it on my list of things I want to do after coming back. And maybe just because I think we have to finish, and I know it sounds a little bit cheesy, and I know that it's maybe a little bit over the top, and I know that it's also democratically not completely, putting it in the right place, but I really still feel that, I'm also an MEP for citizens in the UK. And really, and I don't just say it, I will not be able to probably answer all the questions, but if there are issues that as Oxford for Europe, but also, other associations that you would like to raise, we are a very active parliament, we are very engaged, we have a lot of things on various topics going on, so do get in touch. The worst thing that can happen is that I say we don't know what to do, but I think keeping in touch is more important than ever. So.
Thank you very much. Before we wrap up, I think Mike, you had something to tell us.
Oh, the offer. Yes, I also thought I would put this on
Mike,
camera.
by the way, has touch wood, he's been streaming us, and we should have a recording, at least in part, and we should have some online.
So it should be on my Facebook, Mike Cashman. I tried to put it on the YouTube channel, wasn't clever enough to do that, but hopefully that will be saved. Yes, apart from loving everything that I've heard, but you wanted the offer.
Yes.
So at the back is a box of CDs. They're mostly CDs of Brexit's a Musical Trick, which is a full Brexit musical using every major tune from Les Miserables. If you take one of those CDs and put £10, if you've got it, into the Oxford for Donations box, then all the proceeds will go to Oxford for Europe. There are also, because I didn't stop with the Brexit musical, there's also a COVID musical. I don't take pardon, I'm talking bollocks from the Rose Garden, with 21 songs making fun of the government's approach to COVID, mostly, with a little bit of Brexit in there as well. So there's a few of those, again, £10. If you haven't got any cash on you, just write an IOU, order it online, but just tell me that you don't need it because you've taken the CD. So just take it and donate.
Thank you very much indeed, Mike. And also, if you'd like to make a small contribution to the heads of today in a similar way on the way out, that would be appreciated as well. we can say thank you very much,
Yeah.
Terry and Faye.
Can I give Terry a gift?
Yes.
So you don't have to put your hand in your pocket, Terry, but for you, for free, I'll open it up so you see what's there. So it's a full packet of British sovereignty. And if you want the books of the music and the musical and the CDs, or if you haven't got room in your luggage, I've got it all on one USB stick.
I think I prefer the USB stick.
Okay, there you are.
Thanks. Thank you so much.
All right, lovely to see you here.
I'm just going to hate one.
I'm going to hold this up so that you can all see. That's so bright. Thank you so much for coming, everyone. It was fantastic.
Thank you very much. We'll go outside to record the occasion, and hopefully we'll give that to the local media. Thank you very much. Thank you, Terry.
Thank you.
British Sovereignty is available from viewdelta.com. Citizen Action and EU-UK Friendship. Terry Reintke MEP visits Oxford. A public discussion hosted by Oxford for Europe, 30th of June 2022.